Alright, hello. Today I'm going to be talking about an aircraft. I'm going to be talking about the British Hawker Hurricane Mark I. The Hawker Hurricane Mark I was a British aircraft that mainly saw action during the Battle of Britain and later stages of the war, having an armament of around 850 cals with around a top speed of 425 miles an hour. The Hurricane was meant to soak up damage and shoot down bombers, which is the main threat to London at this current time. Not only this, the Hawker was also given an outstanding range for its weight and had enough ammo to at least engage a full bomber squad. Thus, his whole purpose was for fighting bombers. It wasn't really meant for fighting head-on combat with other fighters such as the Bf-109, seeing how the Bf-109 actually tended to be much more maneuverable compared to the heavier Hawker Hurricane. But the Hawker Hurricane still did have its triumphs, mainly consisting of extreme armor and the ability to be able to soak up an extreme amount of damage, as you could just see. The Hawker's ability is mainly what saved the British in the early stages in the Battle of Britain. But there's also other things that the Hawker had that not many other aircraft did. One of these was the ability to what's known as bolt projection, which is when an aircraft runs out of ammo, it will eject the rack out, and basically like tanks, how tanks have autoloaders, it will immediately load in the next newest rack, which was a very new invention at the time and was something unseen on most aircraft. Now, the Hawker also did have a climb rate of about 250 feet per second. The service ceiling can go to about 22,000 feet and a little bit above, depending on the engine. And another thing that made the Hawker Hurricane stand out was its Rolls-Royce engine. This engine also was used to power the Spitfire and many other British aircraft, and is what made the Mustang such a famous and well-known aircraft for its speed and maneuverability. Not only this, the Hawker is proven not only the EA was very reliable with its crews, even in the later stages of the war when it was apparent that they thought they got to a point where planes like the Hawker were too heavy and too big, but it also had a great use as a ground attack role. This would also help the British stop the Japanese invasion and would stall them at Burma. They'd still lose but inflict heavy casualties. And there's another variant of the Hawker Hurricane. It was known as the Sea Hurricane. It's a Hawker Hurricane, but it's made for carrier-based operations with 4 Hispano cannons instead of the 8 Browning 303 machine guns. The reason why the British made the Hawker Hurricane, though, was because seeing the German threat as an active menace and realizing what they had, as a quick response, British designers came up to the board and came up with this teacup machine. The Hawker Hurricane and the Spitfire both live to be some of the most well-known aircraft of the war. Hawker Hurricanes also had the first ejection seats of their time, which was a very new concept. Usually the pilot would have to crank the handle but it automatically would rip the canopy off due to the sheer excessive wind, and it would take the pilot with it. This is what mainly led to the Hawker Hurricane's very low amount of pilots who would die from crashes. But these were only in later versions. These were not used in the Mark I. The Mark I's were mainly produced from 1939 through 41, with later seeing the replacement of the Hawker Hurricane Mark II, having a stronger engine, more armor, and what arguably are some of the best cannons, the Hispanos. But that is a video I will have to cover next time, when I cover the Hawker Hurricane Mark II, and not the Mark I. Not only that, the Mark I also had outstanding performance in the Asian islands, fighting against the Imperial Japanese. But the Imperial Japanese had something that I will discuss in another podcast that the British didn't. And it was that the Japanese had very light aircraft, allowing for much tighter turn rates. And also, even while sacrificing its armor, made it a very maneuverable and very hard target to hit, as shown here. The A6M20 would become feared amongst Allied pilots for being one of the most maneuverable aircraft, as the American F-4F Wildcats would be greatly outmatched. But Hurricanes were what basically saved the size of the Pacific in the early stages. But now that I went on enough about rambling about the Hawker Hurricane Mark I, I will just do gameplay now. Seeing as none of this stuff is necessary. Oh, and the Hawker Hurricane came down with both landing gear. Meanwhile, plane like the Zero came out with one landing gear at a time, which could cause some problems. The interior of the Hawker Hurricane is very also well represented. I will link the game down in the description if you want to play it. It's a really good game, and I have to put the link down or else I'm going to get copyrighted. But now I'll just let you see some Hawker Hurricane footage. Oh, you kamikaze, damn it. But one final fact is that later in the war, the Hawker Hurricane would actually end up having almost as much kills as the Spitfire and Hawker Typhoon combined, as it not only saw service in Europe, it also saw service heavily in the Mediterranean in the fight against the Italians. It kept the Italians at bay in Malta and stopped them from their inevitable invasion of Egypt, and would be known as the saviors of North Africa for their absolutely outstanding tribute to the British victories. With an unknown kill-to-death ratio, the only thing we know about the hurricane, though, is that it was a force to be reckoned with. That during the Battle of Britain, even though the Spitfire was well known, the Hawker Hurricane still had a placing ground as one of history's greatest propeller aircraft. And there's many other things to go with the Hawker. The company itself has had an extended history dating all the way back to World War I. So the company already knew a thing or two when it came to plane building. And the British concerns weren't actually the Germans at first. Seeing how most of their important colonies were in Africa, they sought to build an aircraft, which would be the Hawker Hurricane, that could work in the extremely hot deserts of North Africa. And the Hawker Hurricane was formed. Not only could it have exceptional performance in the hot suns and dunes, which is exactly what planes like the Hurricane needed, they needed to be heavily armored. Except when the Hawker Hurricanes came up against the German Bf-109s and their cannons, they realized it was under-armored. And it was only from there the Hawker Hurricane's downfall would begin. And from there, it would go down and down until its official retirement in 1944. The Hawker Hurricane Mark I served a glorious life, as shown here in the specs. It served long past World War II, serving with some other countries, for example Poland, and its post-World War II state. The Hawker Hurricane would remain an icon of British engineering and would remain the savior of Britain, along with the Spitfire. I hope you enjoyed and subscribe. Thank you for listening.